Hey guys, my name is David and welcome back to my channel. First off, it's a very windy day today, so hopefully it doesn't disrupt this video too much. If it does, then I'll have to reshoot it. But today I am going to be reviewing Dracula, obviously by Bram Stoker. I did this as a buddy read with Marissa Bailey, as we have both never read Dracula. Obviously we both knew what the story was about by the movies and pop culture and all that type of stuff. But when it came to reading the physical book, we haven't read it before. I tried to listen to it on audio, but I couldn't get into it. But she said that if you want to reread it, we can do it as a buddy read. We both had the same experience with the book. To be honest, guys, this is probably going to upset people that love this book, that hold it in high regard, and I do see why people hold it in such a high position. I think that this was a case of me hyping the book up too much and thinking, okay, it's Dracula. Because if you are a horror fan, hell, if you are a fan of reading, then Dracula, especially during this time of the year, is one of the books which is essential for you to read. It's one of the top books you should read, especially if you're into horror, which I am. And I know that people love this book so much, so there was that hype of it being Dracula, you know, Dracula, the Lord of Darkness, the head vampire, whatever you want to describe him as. And I knew that there was that risk of people, you know, getting on to me in the comments with not liking this book so much, or not thinking that it's the greatest thing ever. So if you enjoyed this book, please take this video with a grain of salt. I could have easily done a rant video or a mini rant on this book, but I can see why it's so popular. I don't really need to explain the plot of Dracula, so what I'll do is I will explain the characters, because everyone knows what the story is. Even if you've never read the book, you know what the story is. So Dracula is a very unique individual. Obviously he's a vampire and he has been on Earth for many years, and during that time frame he's become very intelligent. He's become immersed in different cultures, and he knows how to survive, and he knows how to manipulate and control people. He is very articulate, he's very well educated, he's very well spoken, but he does have this uncontrollable bloodlust. Castle Dracula is fantastic in its portrayal as a gothic castle. It's dark, it's creepy, and when our main character Jonathan, or one of our main characters Jonathan, goes to the castle to do some business deals with Dracula, I think it's like property related. When Jonathan goes to the castle, he goes on two carriages, one that's got normal everyday people in it, you know, human beings on it, and they know that he's going to Castle Dracula as he's quite open about it, and they are like warning him about it and doing the evil eye, and I'm pretty sure they're speaking in Romanian because he doesn't know what they're saying half the time. But when he goes on to the second carriage, which is more or less a carriage straight out of hell, it is so descriptive about how it rushes through the landscape, and all these wolves are around it trying to like bite it and stop it. But what I find interesting is that these horses that are pulling this dark carriage with this dark rider are just as scared as Jonathan is. So I thought that that was kind of cool that they didn't go for like dark evil horses pulling this carriage. Jonathan as a character, when he's in Castle Dracula, he thinks that he is imprisoned because he's the only person there. Sometimes he is locked in his room, and sometimes he sees Dracula climbing up and sometimes down walls outside of the castle itself, and he constantly thinks that he is in danger, despite the fact that Dracula hasn't shown any violent tendencies towards him. He hasn't been mean or horrible to him. In fact, he's been a gracious guest and even giving him food and shelter. But I do understand that he's very upset about him being locked in his castle and not being allowed to get out, and being afraid of what he's seen of Dracula himself. There is a scene in the book where there are 3 female vampires that encounter, or Jonathan does encounter, that are vampires themselves, that are very seductive, and Dracula does come in and he tells them, look, don't harm him, he belongs to me and all that stuff, and he throws them a sack that has a crying baby in it. Well, I'm pretty sure it doesn't tell you flat out that there's a baby in it, but it is crying like a baby, and you know what exactly it is. It's a sack with a baby in it that is still alive and crying, and he's thrown it to the vampires so they can eat it. And it's also a horrible and sad scene when the mother of the baby comes to the castle and Jonathan's looking out of a window and sees her, saying, and the woman's begging Jonathan or the castle or Dracula or whoever to free her baby and give her back her baby. So I thought that Jonathan was a kind of a annoying character, but he was okay, I suppose. He's always going on about his, I don't know, fiance or wife or whatever, mistress, I don't know, Mina, and how he's writing letters to her, and we find, and we are then put into the perspective of Mina herself, which I thought was a very, very weak character. She's extremely naive, extremely boring, extremely dependent on Jonathan, saying, oh, I hope Jonathan will come back soon, I can't wait to be with Jonathan again. It's like, we know, we get the point, you love Jonathan, but you don't have to keep on going on about it. And I thought that she was a very, very weak character. Lucy, who is, I suppose, her best friend, is kind of a ditzy blonde character. No offense to any blondes that are watching this. She's all like, oh, how pretty I am, I can get any guy I want, all I have to do is like fluff my hair out and just flutter my eyelashes and maybe unbutton my shirt and men will fall down at my feet. You actually get the idea with that. But if you watched any of the movies, then you know that Lucy encounters Dracula and she slowly transforms into a vampire. So she's just a little bit more tolerable than Mina, but that's because she turns into a vampire. Hey guys, yes, I know I'm not filming in the cemetery right now for this clip, but when I came back home after I originally filmed this video, I forgot to mention one of my favourite characters in the book, and that was Renfield. I felt that I couldn't really do a video talking about Dracula without mentioning Renfield. Renfield is basically in a mental asylum. To put it bluntly, he is batshit insane in this book. He is constantly referring to Dracula as his master, and he is always eating flies and capturing insects and keeping spiders to feed on birds or flies or whatever, and he also wants to have a cat or a kitten so he can ultimately feed the birds to the cats. He is a unique and quirky individual, certainly different, and you never really know where you stand with him, as he seems to be anything from completely mad to a rational thinking human being that knows perfectly well what he wants to do, and yes, to a certain extent he does seem to have some intelligence. Because he thinks of Dracula and refers to him as his master, Renfield isn't a vampire. But I think that Dracula did something to him apart from turning him into a vampire himself. He clearly did something to Renfield in order to change his way of thinking. Not entirely sure about what he actually did, but it's a great example about how Dracula sees other males beneath him. So guys, that's it. That's all I had to say about Renfield. So back to the video now. And the last character that I want to mention is, of course, Van Helsing, who is a monster hunter. Even though he doesn't specifically say that he's a monster hunter, that's what he is. Essentially, that's what his job is. And when Lucy is found to have weird bite marks on her, he goes to her and he looks at her and he diagnoses her, saying, right, look, this is what's happened, and we need to do this, 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 and that. He doesn't specifically say, and if he does, it's very, very, very vague and very, very cryptic. He doesn't specifically say that Lucy is turning into a vampire, but he likes to hype it up and describe what's going on, especially when it comes to Dracula. He likes to describe him in detail, even to a massive extent. And throughout the book I'm like, why can't you just tell Mina and all these other people exactly what's happened to Lucy, and that she's been bitten by a vampire and vampires exist and we have to do these things to prevent it. But I suppose if he did say that, they would think that he was crazy or batshit insane and dismiss him, and he would be fighting a losing battle, so he had to try to not really give too much away and gain their trust. I don't know. But when they encounter Dracula and they have to go and try to encounter him and destroy him, it takes them ages to do it. Even when they know exactly where he is, it takes them ages just to go and get him and kill him, and it takes Van Helsing a long time to describe what Dracula is. Yeah, it's like, okay, we actually get the point. We get the point. I mean, I know that this was the first book and the first instance of Dracula, so Bram had to write a very detailed description so the reader could know exactly what Dracula was, because at that point they didn't know who Dracula was. But he could have done with a little bit less of the description. And going into this book, I knew that it wasn't going to be overly gory and bloody. There wasn't going to be people getting their throats ripped out and having all this like blood spraying out of their necks. I knew it wasn't going to be overly gory and creepy. Well, it's more creepy than gory, but I mean, you know what I mean. And that was because about when it was written. And I have read numerous books that were written back in the day, like Frankenstein and the Tolkien Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. I know they aren't horror, they are fantasy, but you get the point with that. And I've also read numerous times A Christmas Carol, which is a horror book. The writing style is very descriptive. Bram writes his scenes in a very descriptive way, and you can picture them quite vividly in your mind. But there comes a point when, is there too much description? And it dragged a lot for me, it really did. I have got the physical copy of it on my Kindle, but I had to listen to it on audio just to, get through it. As it was very boring at times, and it did drag a bit. Dracula as a vampire is hardly in this book as well. He's in a few scenes, a handful of scenes, but the way I would describe Dracula in Dracula is he's the puppet master, pulling the strings behind the scenes. He is what glues all of our characters together and brings all of our characters together. But when it comes to his physical form, his vampire form, we don't really see him that much. Yes, there are scenes where a bat or a bird or a wolf is in a scene, and it's not specifically described in black and white that, okay, that's the vampire, that's Dracula. It just describes, okay, there's a bat, and it might possibly be Dracula. And lastly, I just want to address the myths around vampires, all that stuff, like garlic mirrors, stakes through the heart, and all that stuff. This book sets up, or she has set up, all them rules and tropes that we know today about vampires. I'm not sure, well no, I have to correct myself. I know this wasn't the first vampire book ever. There was one called Camilla and the Vampire, which are separate things, which came before this, which are described to be possible inspirations for Dracula. So I know this wasn't the first ever vampire book. There was probably stuff after Camilla, or before it rather, but Dracula made vampires cool and interesting and set up all the rules about what vampires can do and how to kill them, how to identify them. But yeah, despite it being interesting, and I did find this book to be the biggest mixed bag ever, it was very dry and it did drag quite a lot. So with that said, let's just go straight over to Marissa now, where she'll be telling you her thoughts on this book as a whole.
Hello, David's channel. It is me, Marissa Bailey, here to give my opinion on what I thought about the Dracula read that we did together. So, this was one of those ones that I had really wanted to read just because it's a classic that everyone's read, and, you know, I love vampires, so I was super excited about it, but unfortunately, I did feel kind of let down by it just because there were parts that dragged so much, and it wasn't as like chilling and scary or, you know, creepy as I thought it was gonna be, and that really did disappoint me because I really enjoyed the Dracula movie even, so I was kind of hoping it would be kind of similar, but yeah, I switched between the physical book and the audiobook because on those slow parts I did like to listen to them kind of sped up, but overall, I gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars, like I said, because it didn't really meet my expectations, and unfortunately, I would not read it again, but I'm glad to say that I've read it once, and, you know, I got to see what everyone talked about, but yeah, it definitely just wasn't as, like, creepy, spooky as I was hoping, but I will say there were some good parts whenever they did have scary parts, so it did make up for that a little bit, and that's why I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. So that is my rating, and thank you for doing this buddy read with me, David, and I'll see you guys next time.
Thank you, Marissa, and if you want to check out her review, I will have it linked down below. I would highly recommend Marissa as a channel. She is awesome. I watch all of her stuff, and she's very articulate. Her video is probably more articulate than mine, but I would highly recommend that you go and check out her video, and please give her a like, comment and subscribe to her channel. She is amazing, and this was a lot of fun to do this buddy read with her. It really was, despite us having the same thoughts and feelings regarding it. We were both disappointed with it, and even she agreed about the whole hype thing. It's not that I'm never ever going to read this book again. I mean, I'm planning to one day read and pick up Hex and Nothing But Black and Teeth again, which not sure why. Maybe I will like them more, but that's for another video. But yeah, I am planning to pick up Dracula again and read it again. It's something that you should, I strongly suspect it's something that you have to read more than once in order to appreciate it and understand it and enjoy it. So guys, that's it. That's all I had to say. Let me know down below, have you read Dracula? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Did you have the same experience as I did? If you enjoyed it, please do not, as I said, do not get upset with me. This is just my own personal thoughts and feelings, my own experience with this book, reading it for the first time. As I said, please do not get upset down below in the comments. In fact, I encourage you to discuss this book with me further, and let's just have a discussion about it down below. It's not that I hated it. I both loved and hated parts of it, or specific parts of it. But yeah, just have a conversation with me down below in the comments, and yeah, I know why this book is so beloved, and in the way I love it, but not to the extent as everyone else. So before I shoot off, once again, please do not forget to actually check out Marissa's review. I will have it linked down below, as well as her channel. She's just a really nice person, and this was a real pleasure to do a buddy read with. She was a absolute joy to read this book with, and it was a shame that it was just okay, but hopefully our next buddy read will be much better. Yeah, with all that out the way, guys, I better let you go, so I'll see you in my next one.